This episode is going to be a review all about the Rokinon 14mm 2.8 full frame lens. If you guys end up liking this gear review, let me know by either subscribing or commenting or liking the video because I've got a few more of these videos to do, but this one is all about the Rokinon 14mm. Now, there's a lot to be said about this lens. It's a fairly popular lens and it can be mounted to quite a few different cameras. But the one I have right now is a Canon EF mount, and like I said, it's a full frame lens. Now, I'm gonna start with the negatives about the lens because some of these things might be an absolute deal breaker for you because there are some pretty big downsides. The first one, and I think the most noticeable one, being there are no electrical contacts on this lens. So normally when you get a lens for your camera, you have some like electrical contacts on the back where it communicates with the camera, and that is for use on like an autofocus motor or even just simple things like changing the aperture. So this one, because it has no electrical contacts, you don't get any of those kind of like luxuries that you would get with a standard lens. So number one being there's no autofocus. So that may be a deal breaker for you if autofocus is something that you absolutely need. But then I think that the most noticeable thing about this is the aperture. So normally with a a standard lens, you just twist a little knob on your camera and it changes the aperture. But this one is slightly different. This one actually has a ring that you twist where you can change the aperture from 2.8 to 22 and anywhere in between. So that is something that is a little bit different about this lens that you may not be used to when you actually go out and buy it or try it from one of your friends. So the next thing that may be a little bit of a deal breaker for you is actually the front element. Now, not necessarily that you may have a problem with the front element, but because it has this built-in lens hood and it's an incredibly wide-angle lens, it's gonna be almost impossible for you to find filters to actually fit on the front. So if you want like a neutral density filter for long exposure shots, or even like a polarizer just for being out and about, it's going to be almost impossible. Now, there are manufacturers that actually make filters and filter holders for this lens. Obviously, they're going to be very expensive, very niche product, but it is something that you can do if you want. It's just going to be difficult for you to find an adapter to start doing that. Now, I think this may or may not be a negative, but it's kind of an odd feature about this camera is the focusing ring. Obviously it's manual focus, but one of the bizarre things about this is how much you actually have to twist the focus knob to actually twist it from, focusing all the way close to all the way to infinity. It's almost an entire turn around the lens. If you look right here, as I'm twisting it, it's still twisting, and then it focuses to infinity. It's just such a long focus throw that it's almost pointless how much you have to twist the focusing ring. And not that that's going to be a make or break, but it is something that I have found kind of bizarre about this lens. But all in all, that's really the only negative items that I have about this lens. So I can go into the positives. Now, there are a lot of positives about this lens. Number one, and I think foremost, being that it is a 2.8 lens. So 2.8 lenses, they aren't exactly the easiest things to come by because it does require a lot of glass to make it work, and it's usually kind of reserved for more expensive lenses. But that is huge for a lot of people out there, especially if you're doing like maybe astrophotography. A wide angle 2.8 lens is a huge deal for you because you can obviously get those bright exposures for the night sky to get all the stars, and it's wide angle, so you can kind of use a little bit longer exposure times and not get the star trails. And then the second thing is obviously it's a really wide angle lens. There aren't too many 14mm lenses out there, so you have the best of both worlds. You've got the 2.8 and you also have the 14mm wide angle, and it fits on a full frame lens. So with my Sony a7R, I have this Canon EF mount adapted to the a7R, so I'm getting the full range of the 14mm. So you can get some pretty unique views that you wouldn't be able to get with like a normal lens, even like a 24mm lens. This is noticeably wider angle than some of the other lenses. So another big plus for this lens is that it is a budget lens. I mean, believe it or not, a 14mm wide angle 2.8 lens is a budget lens. It's I think right now it's selling for about $330, but you can actually get it on sale right now. I don't know how long the sale is gonna last, but you can get it for like $280. Now, $280 for any lens is a pretty good deal because, as I'm sure you know, a lot of photography and video gear is incredibly expensive. So to be able to find any piece of equipment for $280 is huge, let alone a 2.8 wide angle lens. But you know, because this is a budget lens, it actually doesn't mean that it doesn't perform well, because it's actually a fairly sharp lens in a lot of regards. I would say optically, the only downside to this lens is maybe on the edges it's a little bit sharp, and it actually does have a slight distortion to it. And it's not quite barrel distortion, and it's not like a pincushion distortion. I can't really place my finger on what type of distortion it is, but it does have a little bit of lens distortion. But other than that, I mean, it's a pretty pin sharp lens. Every time I use this for like a photo or a video or something like that, I'm always incredibly surprised how well this performs optically. So I'm gonna show you guys some images right here. They were all taken with the Sony a7R. So it's taking advantage of the full frame capabilities of this lens. So you're getting the full 14mm wide angle, but just focus on how sharp this lens is and also how well it performs in other aspects too, you know, in terms of the distortion and things like that. So I'm going to be showing you some video clips as well. Now keep in mind, these are going to be taken with the Sony a6300, which is a crop sensor camera. So that'll end up cropping this 14mm to about 20 or 21 millimeters. So it's not as wide as the photos I have on my a7R, but it is still incredibly wide. But one thing to keep in mind, these are all handheld shots, so you can kind of get an idea of what this lens looks like in its raw form. And I think I also have like some wedding shots in here too, so I'll kind of toss some of those clips in there. Overall, I would say this is a fantastic lens. I'd say if you have the opportunity to try one out or take some photos with it, go ahead and try it. I mean, I would even say buy it sight unseen, because it's a really, really great lens with the obvious drawbacks of, you know, it being, you know, a fully manual lens. It still is a fantastic lens, and I would highly, highly recommend it. So in the links down below in the description, I'm going to be putting full res JPEGs for download, and also links to like Amazon links for this exact lens, and maybe some different mounts of the lens. So I do want to thank you guys again for watching the entire video. If you can, like, subscribe, because I've got some more content coming out very, very soon, and I will see you on the next one.